So a little while back, I made a video talking about one of my favorite obscure horror games called No One Lives Under the Lighthouse, and I gotta say that was one of my favorite videos I ever made. Like I said in that video, there's something so enjoyable to me about hunting down really obscure games and playing them as blindly as I can, so that's what I set out to do again. For this video, I hunted on Steam for another obscure horror game that I could sink some hours into, and after turning to some helpful YouTube comments, I finally found the one I want to talk about today. The horror game in question is a little indie title called It Steals, which I found on Steam with only 100 reviews at the time of writing this script. What caught my interest when I found this game was the supposed arcade horror style it advertised, as well as the cool looking graphics and color scheme. So I bought the game and gave it a shot, and needless to say, it scared the shit out of me. It Steals is a really simple horror game, which uses its dark environments and monsters which always hide in the dark to keep you on edge from start to finish. And after finishing all 5 of its game modes, I must say that it's now one of my favorite horror games of all time. I'd love to go in depth today on each one of its game modes, talking about what makes them all terrifying in their own regards, while also discussing some gameplay elements that make each one appeal to me. So without further ado, let's delve into it! So before I delve into the specific game modes that make up It Steals, I'd first like to give a short summary of what this game even is. It Steals is a Pac-Man style arcade horror game where you run around multiple dark mazes trying to collect all the blue orbs which can be found within it. In each maze, you're given a different assortment of tools to find all the orbs, as well as there being a new monster with new mechanics trapped in the maze with you. All these monsters function very differently from one another, however there is one thing that each of them have in common, that being that their main way of hunting you down is stealth. Each monster in this game hides from you in its own unique way, forcing you to use whatever tools you have at your disposal to locate it and stop it from sneaking up on you. It's a terrifying idea for a horror game, which gets further amplified by how this game executes it in its 5 main game modes. So let's get started talking about each one individually, starting with the classic mode. The classic game mode of It Steals is a nice, simple experience which settles you into the nightmares that are to come from this game. In this game mode, a monster the game aptly calls Legs attempts to stalk you through the maze you both find yourselves trapped in together. If you hear Legs approaching, you must quickly turn to look at him with your flashlight to scare him away. This little gameplay loop of collecting orbs while shining your light at Legs is occasionally broken up by him suddenly stopping to stare at you at random times with a massive run prompt appearing on your screen. When this happens, you have to run away, avoiding any dead ends while Legs pursues you. If you enter this chase sequence a second time while trying to collect all the orbs in the maze, then it's game over for you because Legs will kill you every single time. I find this game mode to be one of the less scary ones out of the 5, but it is a perfect introduction to the game and its mechanics. The dark, eerie maze it takes place in is a really cool environment, and the splashes of red on the walls do a wonderful job at throwing off the player, making them question whether they're staring at Legs' eyes or not. I also really adore the sound design here. The sound Legs makes as he slowly stalks up to you are really off-putting, and the sudden loud noise of his scurrying footsteps when you catch him can make you jump even when you know he's going to be there. Then of course there's the best of the sound design for this section of the game, the chase sequences. The way that sound was used to make this monster feel massive and imposing was one of the things that made this game really stand out to me when I started playing it. The sound of its massive, heavy footsteps, the way it makes the screen shake, and the way it screeches when you get to its second chase scared the crap out of me, making me dread whatever was to come next. Aside from the sound design though, this game mode has a lot of little details with how the monster works which are used to mislead and deceive you. For example, near the end of this section when you only have 2 orbs left to collect, the screen will actually tell you that you need 200, which on your first time playing can really catch you by surprise. Another example of this trickery is when you only have 1 orb left to collect. When there's only one orb left on the map, the monster's eyes will change from their usual red color to blue, and they'll begin emitting the sound which indicates that you're approaching an orb. It's a trick the game pulls on you completely out of nowhere, and it cost me a couple runs before I figured out what was really going on. Overall, this game mode is a great introduction to what It Steals has to offer as an experience. It's fun, simple, and pretty scary at times, but things get way scarier from here. Shutter Mode is the second of this game's 5 game modes, and it takes everything that made Classic Mode terrifying and amps it up to 11. In this game mode, we're in a very similar map to Classic Mode, facing the same monster from before, the difference now being that we're only armed with a camera. If we hear legs approaching us, we must quickly turn to where he's coming from and use the flash of our camera to scare him away. During this segment's chase sequences, the monster chasing us moves faster than our character, so this time we have to use our camera to momentarily stun him as we try to gain distance. During this game mode, if at any point we run out of camera battery, it's going to be game over. I really love this particular level. The simple change of replacing the flashlight from the previous level does so much to amplify the horror of our situation. We constantly find ourselves stressed about where the monster will be coming from and whether or not we'll be able to catch him in time, because unlike the last level, the resource we use to fend it off is very limited, making each attempt to catch him very valuable. And then there's those chase sequences. By having legs move so much faster, it makes the whole thing feel extremely frantic. Running from room to room, hoping we don't run into any dead ends, was already a terrifying sequence to deal with, but throw in the fact that we have to randomly turn around just barely to stun our pursuer, and you have something on a whole other level. I also think that the sound design I praised in the previous level is greatly improved in this one. Because the chase sequences in Shutter Mode have the monster chasing us at a much faster speed, you can hear him approaching from a mile away with these loud skittering footsteps which make you panic the entire time the chase is happening. Overall, this level just takes everything that made the first one great and improves upon it with more satisfying and stressful mechanics. And a fun little bonus to it is the cutscene at the end of it, where we get to look at all the photos we took of the monster over the course of our playthrough. Out of all the levels in It Steals, this was the one that scared me the most. Hide and Seek is a game mode which turns the formula of the game on its head completely, shifting the gameplay loop of trying to find a monster which sneaks up on you into a game all about trying to avoid the monster at all costs. In Hide and Seek mode, we find ourselves within a maze like the previous 2 levels. However, something has changed. Rather than being followed by a monster, we're given a prompt telling us that we're it. While we're it, we have to try our hardest not to find the hiding places of the monster in the maze with us. The monster can be hiding anywhere, and he takes the form of a lump of pixels which lies on the ground. If we are unfortunate enough to find him, we get a jump scare as he jumps up with glowing red eyes and we're told that he is now it. We then only have 5 seconds to hide before he begins hunting us down. If we get found, he begins to chase us, and only after this chase sequence can we begin the cycle over again. This game mode scared me so badly the first time I played it. Something about going around every corner knowing well that there may be something that pops up at you is so nerve-wracking, and it maintains that stress with the consequences of running into the thing you try to avoid being the scariest thing in the entire game. When you enter the hide sequence of the game, nothing can compare to the overwhelming dread of listening to those massive footsteps getting closer and closer as this droning ambience plays and the glowing eyes of the monster illuminate the room. This level does everything in its power to make you feel so vulnerable, and I adore it for that reason. It accomplishes this best when you finally do get found by the monster and you're forced to run from it. While the monster chases you in this game mode, it does everything to catch you. It moves really fast, it crashes through walls, and it always knows where you are. It's absolutely terrifying. Out of all the game modes in It Steals, this one is easily my favorite. Most of my footage of me screaming and crying like a little baby comes from this one, and that made it the one that stuck with me the longest. So if I'm being honest, this game mode is easily my least favorite out of the 5. Not necessarily because I think it's bad, I just feel mechanically the other ones are a lot stronger and make more sense. In Living Walls, we find ourselves in a very unique environment compared to what we've been accustomed to with the previous 3 we've played. We start off in a bunker where we're given ominous hints of what lurks outside, all the while being told how to use the items we're now equipped with, a device with a timer on it. When we leave this bunker, the timer begins to tick down and the game begins. In Living Walls, we must use the device on our wrist to look for monsters which hide inside the walls. These monsters look just like the walls, and our only indicator of whether or not we're looking at one is when the device glows green. Get too close to one of these new monsters and they'll attack you. As well as this mechanic, we also have to keep track of the time ticking down on the device. If we're not inside one of the several bunkers on the map by the time the timer hits 0, it's game over. While I don't necessarily think this game mode is that bad, I feel like it has some issues that aren't really present in the other 4. The 2 mechanics with the timer and the monsters in the wall are pretty interesting on their own. However, I don't really feel like they complement each other very well. I found that using the device to try and pinpoint the locations of the monsters didn't work really well when I was constantly trying to do things quickly to make sure I had made the most of my time. Anytime I tried to take it slow and avoid the monsters, I died for it. Anytime I tried to go quickly and make good time, I died for that as well. Maybe it's just because I sucked at this level, but I just feel like the mechanics conflict a little bit too much to be satisfying. Now with that said, there are a few things I really like about this level. One thing I love about the timer mechanic is how it feels when you just barely get to a bunker with barely enough time to spare, slamming the vault door shut as you hear something undesirable approaching. I also love the whole mechanic with the device which warns you when you look in the direction of a monster. Because the monsters blend in with the environment you're trapped in, seeing on the radar when you're staring death in the eyes when you otherwise wouldn't know is a really creepy feeling. Like I said before, I love the 2 mechanics of this level a ton. I just think that maybe they would have been better off as 2 different levels rather than sharing one together. Overall, it isn't a bad experience, just one I revisit the least out of the 5. The final, and possibly most inventive of the levels in this game, is the Phantom. This is another level which completely turns the gameplay of It Steals on its head, introducing us to a new monster and mechanic which creates some really tense moments. In this level, we find ourselves in another new environment filled with random objects like boxes, tables, and lampshades. The point of these random objects becomes very apparent once we learn what we're trapped inside here with. In this level, we are being hunted by an invisible monster which can only be seen when it pushes over the objects in a room while looking for us. What makes this monster really interesting, however, is the fact that it can't see us either. The objects that are scattered between the rooms on this level both act as a way for us to identify the monster, as well as the monster to identify us. In order to avoid being caught by the Phantom, the game does give us a few tools that we can use. Firstly, we're now able to hold our breath while standing still to reduce the amount of noise we make, allowing the monster to pass by when it's in a room with us. The other way to avoid the monster is by placing devices on the floor which can catch it if it begins to chase us. These devices take a long time to set up and can only affect the monster once a chase has begun though, so they're really a last-ditch effort. I find this level in particular to probably be the most fun and inventive gameplay-wise. Trying to use a tool that the monster is also using against you is a really cool idea, and the mechanics introduced to help you get away feel really satisfying and allow for some really tense moments. Sitting in a room with the Phantom while holding your breath feels like being a character in a horror movie, with you waiting for it to leave desperately, knowing that your character can't hold it forever. The devices you can set up to catch the Phantom are also really satisfying to use, with each one feeling like a trap being placed to use later. It feels really good to predict where the monster will be and be able to fall back on a well-placed trap to get yourself out of a scenario where you would normally be doomed. Overall, this level is very well crafted, and while it didn't scare me as much as some of the others, I gotta say it was definitely the most fun. The creativity behind its designs and mechanics was a really refreshing way to finish the game, and I'm really happy I got to experience it. It Steals is a great horror game which uses a very simple concept to its advantage by reinventing it in new and creative ways with its 5 self-contained game modes. Each one of these levels has some kind of new, interesting mechanic that it brings to the table, while maintaining the core fundamental gameplay that makes the game have its identity, and I have a ton of respect for it for that reason. If this review has made you interested in it at all, I highly recommend you try the game yourself. I feel like it's painfully underrated and deserves way more attention and praise than it currently gets. But either way though, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I had a ton of fun making this one, and I greatly look forward to seeing you again in whatever my next project ends up being. Goodbye for now. Okay, I think he's gone. I don't think he's listening anymore. Please, if you made it this far into the video, please send help. I need you to send help!